Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Dunk, and this is an update video for build 86.0 of Terraform Plus. So let's get into it. There's a number of changes in this update. There are some changes to agriculture, some changes to terrain, and if you've been paying attention to the preview videos, there are mechanisms. There's a whole lot of stuff to get into. And I think I want to start with mechanisms right here. So actually, I'm going to start with showing you the crafting recipes. So let's go into survival mode. Just make a crafting table here. So to get started with mechanisms, the two main things you'll need, well, to get some power you'll need a water wheel, but the two things you'll probably be using the most are going to be axle bearings and axles. So axles themselves are pretty simple. I'll show you a couple of those right now. You take a saw and some support beams, and you will get some axles out of that. Does a little bit of damage to your saw. Next, let's talk about the axle bearings. So an axle bearing is made up of 2 support beams and 2 bits of lumber. Gets you an axle bearing. In fact, I'm actually going to make a few of these. Not too many. Let's just make 7. So when you're working with axles, I think you can't have an axle more than like 7 blocks from an axle bearing, or else you just can't place them anymore. Axle bearings also are kind of like the junction. Anytime that you want to change the direction of your power or attach anything, you'll probably need an axle for that. You'll also need some falling water. Here I've just set this up. I just have a little bit of water that falls down into a hole in the ground there. But I'm not expecting you to build something like this, especially because you can't really move water around for the vast majority of the game in Terraform. So I expect you to be looking for an elevated spring. Those are pretty common, especially if you find like a mountainous region. You can find usually a spring. You might get lucky and find one very high up, because the distance that the water falls determines how much power you're going to get. And we'll talk a little bit about that once we get this all set up. So I'm just going to start placing some axle bearings. You can see it'll give me a little bit of a highlight as to what the axle bearing will look like. If I sneak, it'll rotate the direction. But I just need that there and that there. I'm going to put an axle in each side there. So this is what's going to hold my water wheel. Notice that there's it's 2 blocks from the falling water. That is how we want it to go. And then to make our water wheel, we take plank blocks like this and a wrought iron sheet right in the middle. So that gets us our water wheel. Just put that on. You can see it's going to start to rotate as the water falls. And now we need to get this power to where we want to use it. I'm going to show you a couple things we can do with it. So we're going to put an axle bearing right there and our wooden axle right there. And then I want to show you how we're going to rotate the power. And so we're going to take some lumber, put the lumber like that, take an axle, put it there, and our copper saw. And that is going to get us a wooden gear. You can see it says 18 teeth on it. The number of teeth is important because it's the ratio of the number of teeth that determine the change in speed. So we can get a gear like that. If we take this 18 tooth gear and put it into the crafting grid, you can see we can craft it into a 17 tooth gear, and that into a 16 tooth gear, and that to 15, and this goes down to 9. And let's just go down to 13, for example. But you know, if you really want a lot of 13 teeth gears, that's kind of annoying to have to craft 18 tooth gears all the time and then just, craft them down all the time. So there is a bit of a shortcut. So let's say I do my recipe again for the 18 tooth gear, but I put the 13 tooth gear into the crafting grid. It'll just make a copy. So again, the axle is not consumed. This gear is not consumed. Now I have 2 13 tooth gears. So that is how you'll be doing that. In fact, let's actually we'll make 1 more of these. Of these. Well, actually, no, I'm going to make a big one. And we'll see why in a sec. In fact, I might actually, Nah, that probably doesn't matter. Anyway, so let's put our big gear right there. And if we go from big to small, that means that we'll get an increase in speed. So we put the smaller gear there, and now this is spinning faster than this was. In fact, I think we're actually going to need one more gear. So let us make one more. Okay, and so I'm just gonna, I guess I'm gonna have to, let's dig down a sec. Because I want to be able to put a gear on here. Now if I shift click, that just pops the gear right off. So right click to put it on, shift click to take it off. We'll put our last axle there, and we'll probably just make a couple more axles in a sec. So about the axle bearings, they do have to be supported underneath. If they're a vertical axle bearing like this one is, it needs to be supported on both sides. They can connect to either solid blocks or to support beams. Okay, and there is our gear there. So I guess we'll start here by looking at the crankshaft. So let's make, we have 2 axles here, but let's make a couple more axles. Because we might need some more lumber as well. So to make the crankshaft, we are going to have 3 axles like that, and then some white elm like that, and that will make our wooden crankshaft. I believe actually we're going to need to put our axle down like that first, and then that'll start to pump our bellows. Now this is not really moving that fast. If we had a better gear ratio, probably get some more power out of this. So let's just light our forge. It's not going to heat up right away. And in fact, I probably will, want to make this go a little faster. In fact, let's, we'll check back on this in a little bit. But let's talk about some other things that you might be able to do with power while we're waiting for that. So I did show off in the video that there is a millstone that you can work with now. Along with the introduction, oh, this is actually heating up quite a bit. So it's going to get a little bit hotter than you could probably get on your own. But it's not going to, yeah, so it's just capped out there. So to melt iron or steel, you need to be way up there in the brilliant white area. So we didn't quite reach it with the bellows just going at this speed. But this looks to be yellow, white probably in temperature. So depending on how fast your water wheel is going, you can actually kind of determine how hot your forge might get. I'm pretty sure this is probably welding temperature for iron and steel. So if you just wanted a forge that would just bring your metal up to welding temperature without having to worry about melting it, this is the setup that you might want to go with. If we had, say, let's take this one off. We have 13 teeth on that. So let's cut this down. Oh, that's 10 still. Let's go all the way down to 9 teeth. Oop. Yeah, it's okay. So I might have to work on the sound there. That seems to be blowing a bit fast, but it is. So the temperature has gone up a little bit. I think if we actually had even faster, that's getting kind of annoying. Okay, let's just. Is that blocks? Yeah, just turn that off. Like, so if we had, oh, I don't know. Let's go into creative mode for a sec. Let's grab our big gear and another small gear. Oop, oop. Give me that back. That becomes small gear. So this will get pumped a lot faster now. And then you come off and you become big gear. So you can see this goes from 18 to 9, that doubles it. This goes from 18 to 9, that doubles it again. So this is now going 4 times as fast. And you can see, yeah, the temperature is going up. And I think if you went to 8 times, you would definitely be well into the range of melting iron and steel. So previously, an inability to get the bellows to manually click the bellows enough was something that was blocking players from being able to get, or to easily get into those later game metals. I put that in the game because I had originally been planning to not release this until the mechanisms were done. I've been working on these mechanisms since September. And then I got involved with the Love Tropics fundraiser, and I wanted to release the sharks. And this ended up being in the game, and I wasn't terribly broken up about the fact that you couldn't get to steel and wrought iron. But I thought it was high time to fix that, so we do have mechanisms working now. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, well, we don't actually need this to be going anywhere. Let's stop this. So break that. That does pop off our crankshaft because it doesn't want to exist on its own. And you can see our forge is already cooling down. Because there are a few other things I want to show. Let's get rid of you. Take you off. Because there are a couple other things I want to show here. So, in one of the preview videos, I believe I showed the axle couple. Oh, yeah, let me grab that. I think that was the only... Is there another axle that we lost here? Did it run away? It doesn't really matter. Let me grab another axle. Oh, did we use up all of our lumber? We probably did. Just get some more. Okay, so we take our axle, so one on each side, a bit of lumber, and that gives us our axle couple. So let's go down. Actually, I want to go down a little farther than this. All right, let's put our quern base there. Let us put an axle bearing there. Want to get another axle. Put that there. Our axle couple there. And then, oh, do we need like a stick? Get a stick from this. So let's get a lever. So that links up. So the axle couple with a redstone signal is what's going to connect our axles together. But you notice that it's not actually working. This quern doesn't really work. I've prepared over here a handstone on this quern. You can see that if I, right click to grind, it's only grind 32 ounces. And I think, yeah. So we're actually going to need two things to get this quern here to work. And let's actually grab the grain. And so when I grab the grain, you can see that the flour jumped over to the right output slot. So the reason that's done that is that it's to do with some new functionality that the quern has with hoppers. We'll talk about that in a sec. So we have a wrought iron ingot in this anvil. Go to the plans. There's a new plan here for a rind, which I have prepared right here. So the rind goes into this slot where the handstone might normally go. And the rind is actually it's like a seat that a millstone will sit on top of. So I make a millstone. So that was just raw stone, 8 of them in a big circle, gets us our millstone. Just right click with the millstone. That puts the millstone on. Now I can put that on. You can see it's just quickly just grinding the grain that we have into flour. And then as soon as the flour is all used up, it transfers to the other slot. And so the reason that it does this is that if you have a hopper, like a metal hopper beneath this quern, it's not going to start pulling the flour out in individual 32-ounce stacks. It's going to wait for all the grain that it has, to grind up, and then it'll pull the full stack out. And so also, if I had another hopper feeding into the side of this quern, you'd be able to feed ore later on. At some point, I think in a future update, I'm going to make it so that ore grinding will at least be required for the blast furnace. For now, it's not really that necessary. But you'd be able to put ore, you'd be able to put kaolinite or graphite or something into the side there, all the grains you want, it would feed into the quern, and then the output would be sucked out the bottom and stored in a chest. So you could hook that up to a water wheel and just have all that grinding done automatically for you. So that's the two. Well, you can unhook that and you can see it stops the millstone, and that would be necessary because of the power. So depending on the height of the water, your water wheel will have a maximum amount of load. It doesn't change the speed that the wheel will turn at. I may have other things that go with mechanisms at some point in the future, but for now, speed is not one of the things that varies with power. All that changes is the amount of load on the system. So load is basically the total number of blocks that are in the system that are moving. So for this one, we have this axle, that axle, these gears here, this axle. If this was hooked up, this couple, this axle here, and then the quern. So the quern itself, the millstone, that has its own amount of load. And that is all added up and told to the water wheel. And the water wheel says, okay, that's how much I got to move around. Can I do that with the amount of power that I have? Another thing to remember is that when we have this gear ratio here from 2 to 1, everything that is starting from this block onwards doubled because it's going twice as fast. It's got twice the load. And maybe it's torque, it's whatever it is. That's the approximation we're going with. So normally each axle is 1 load. I think the quern is 5 load. So when we've doubled the speed here, this is 2 load, that's 2 load, that's 2 load, that's 10 load. And of course that does double the speed that it's able to grind things at. But that's kind of the trade-off you have. So if you had, let's say, a couple gears, like maybe I had another gear coming off of this side, and it was going down to maybe power my bellows here. In fact, the bellows, I think, the amount of power it uses, the amount of load it uses, is I think like the square of the speed, something like that, some power of the speed. So it's not even linear. And that's, I thought, just because of the air resistance, something, I don't know. I think that like the air resistance drag something goes up at this. Anyway, not that important. Just what you need to know is that it may turn out that having a quern hooked up and a bellows might be too much for your system, or however many querns you want to have hooked up, or however many bellows you want to have hooked up. We need some water. Let's just grab some from here. So you might want to use couples to disconnect and reconnect different parts of your system in order to make sure that your whole system doesn't lock up. Because if you put too much load onto the water wheel, it will just stop spinning. In fact, if I had like another bit of water coming off that side and it was now, having water fall on both sides of the water wheel, it would pretty much even out. Or whichever side had like a higher water column, that would overpower the other one if the difference in water height was sufficient. There's some math behind the scenes. If you go on CurseForge, there is a download for the source code, so you can poke around if you have an understanding of Java. If you want to see how the stuff works, that is available for anyone to look at. So please feel free if that is something you're interested in. So that is water wheels and mechanisms. There are some more things to talk about, though. For example, the way that agriculture has changed. So if I hold the copper hoe, you will notice now that there is a highlighter. It is red. I look at grass, it is red. And that is kind of interesting, you might think. Why is it red? If I break this bush, we look at the dirt, and that's dark red. So bright red, dark red. And that is to indicate one of the changes in agriculture, which is that farming the land, tilling the land is back-breaking work. It is very difficult to break up the land and make it farmable. So if I right-click on this, you will see that took some of my hunger. Quite a bit of hunger, actually. That's eating up my hunger. You also may notice that there is a new texture for what the ground looks like when it is tilled. It's a few updates ago, I changed all the dirt textures to make them, I think, a little less dull, a little more interesting. And so there is a new texture for farmland that matches the new dirt textures. And it is quite a bit darker than the dirt. You may notice, that's the dirt color, that's the farmland color, so it's a little darker. Anyway, so that is eating up our hunger. Let's actually do one more, and then let's just get some food in creative mode for a sec. Let's just grab like an apple. Okay, and we'll just eat the apple. There's something I want to show you over here, and that is a change to how water works for foods. So previously in TFC, if you had farmland and there was water nearby, that would give you, I think, a 10% speed boost to the growth of crops. So that's not really how this works anymore. So if we go to water mode and then we look at it, you will see that there's kind of like this faint light blue over this farmland. If we press F3, you can see there it says rain 486 right there at the bottom left, rain 486. So the rainfall value is assumed to be millimeters of rain per year. And with 486 rainfall, that means that all of the ground has a tiny amount of water in it naturally. So for some crops, that means that they are perfectly happy to be planted here without any other water nearby. So I take these wheat seeds, throw them down, and you can see we still got that light blue coloring when I look at the wheat seeds. But let's break them. Because let's say I didn't plant wheat seeds, I tried to plant rice seeds. But now it says black. And that is because rice is native not to the Middle East, not to a very arid region. Rice is native to Southeast Asia, which is a very wet, rainy region. And so rice requires more water than wheat does. I'm not going to say that you have to flood your fields. Flooding rice paddies is not actually required for rice to grow. It's just a convenient way to stop weeds from growing. So you don't actually have to flood them, but you do need a lot of water. And in fact, if we bring this hoe over to here, you can see that that actually is quite blue. That's a little less blue. This is also, I think, like 1 block away. If we go like... So you can see how the color changes. So that's like full, that's like 2, that's 3, and that's 1. And you'll notice actually that that's the same as just the regular, tilling the ground anywhere look, is that 1 here. And you can actually think of that as effective distance from water source. So when your rainfall is, I think, at least 450, then all the soil counts as if it is at least 4 blocks, at most 4 blocks from a water source. So for a lot of the grains, that'll be sufficient. I don't think it works for maize. I think maize needs a little bit wetter than that. A lot of vegetables, a lot of the crops are either a distance of 4 or 3. And just to cover what those values are, it is 450 rain is the first level, I believe 950 rain for the second level, 1500 for the third, and I think 2000 for the fourth. So at 2000 rainfall or above, all blocks just count as, which is 2 meters of rain a year. Like, that's a lot of rain. All blocks count as if they're adjacent to water. So if you have rice seeds and your rainfall is 2000 or above, you could just plant them wherever you want. However, unlike previous versions of TFC, if I plant this rice out here, I'll actually just plant it all the way along. Ran out of rice. You know what? These two are the same, so I'm not going to go like that. So you can see that one's got that nice blue, black, black, black. So these rice seeds will never grow. This one will. In fact, you can see these ones say 0%, this one says 3%. Just because it was planted, it gets a little bit of a tick on that first day. So these rice seeds will never grow. Unlike previous versions where they would just grow a little slower, these will never grow, this will grow. So that is just a little bit of how the climate of the area you're in will affect how you farm. So if you want to grow rice and you're in a drier environment, you will have to make like long single rows with the water all the way along, because that's the only way that you'll be able to get the rice to germinate. And then I've just grabbed melon here because melon and I think pumpkins are one of the few seeds that will work 2 away. So if I break that one, put that there. So that the melon does not work here, but it does work there because they have a distance of 2. So that's agriculture changes. One more thing is that the crops take... actually, a couple more things. They take a lot longer to grow now. Let's eat some more food. Crops take a lot longer to grow, about 3 times as long. They were actually originally supposed to take this long to grow, but there was an error where there's code that adjusts crop growth length based on the year length. The values were originally entered relative to a 365-day year because they were real-world values that were used. And then in Terraformacraft, the default year length is 96 days. But someone, some point in the past, I don't know who, honestly, it was probably 2014 or before, accidentally multiplied that 96 over 365 value twice. So the first time was just to adjust it to the correct year length. The second time meant that all seeds just took, 96 365ths of a year to grow compared to their proper value. So that means that wheat will take a good 3 months. Wheat and rice and stuff will take like 3 months of the year to grow. Whereas previously you'd probably get them to be fully harvestable in a month and a half, maybe. So that's something to remember. And the other thing is that farmland will not regain nutrients on its own anymore. Let's get out of survival mode. Because we're going to go time, set, day. And then again, so this farmland you can see here, all of it just changed the stuff that wasn't planted or hadn't, that we planted some stuff and then removed this stuff here. Excuse me. So that's why it hasn't really gone yet. But you can see that the color just changed. And the texture changed. And this is now fallowed farmland. So the regular good farmland is, so you can see this is 6%, that's 0%. Regular farmland is a little darker. The rows that are in it are a little more defined. It's just so that it's easier to tell the difference between farmable land and fallow land. So fallow land is ready to regain nutrients. So over time, it will slowly replenish nutrients. Another thing is that crops, instead of just taking one of the nutrients of A, B, and C, or whatever we call them, to grow, they take all 3, and just whichever was their primary nutrient, they just take a little more. And that's because I'm planning to understand nutrients as NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And all plants need all of those in certain different amounts. Whether rice and wheat really require more of nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium than the other, that's not going to be accurate. I'm going to leave in the nutrient families they were previously in, back when nutrients were less well defined. But I am going to change it to NPK, and that's because I'm going to at some point do a change of how fertilizer is generated and how you can fertilize your crops. So if you do have fertilizer, then you probably won't need to fallow your land. You won't need to leave it. It is by default a quarter of an in-game month, which on a default month length of 8 days is 2 days, which is why I just set the time ahead 2 days in order to get this land to fallow. But if your, let's say like your length was, or your month length was 24 days, then that would be 6 days, right? So 3 times longer month, 3 times longer to fallow the land. And that's what you'll have to do before it'll start to regain nutrients. The amount of nutrients that are in the soil does not affect crop growth time, but crop growth yield. So with low nutrients, your crops will yield little or no edible stuff. So that's important to remember. What else do we got? So we have fallowing. And then if we go back to this mode, you can see, remember, that was red. This is kind of orangish. And that is because, it's not going to show up because I'm in survival mode so that I don't starve and die of thirst while I skip the time ahead. But this is just going to be half of the hunger cost to plow compared to regular grass would be. So by letting your farms fallow, replanting the next year is not as big of a hunger investment, but it is still a hunger investment. At some point in the future, I do plan to add plows. Didn't quite get them into this update because I think they still need a few things to get them all working out. You can see what they look like. They are in the creative menu, but they don't actually function. They don't have an item texture just because they're not ready yet. But if you want to mess around with those aren't part of this update. You can't craft them. If you just want to see, you can hook them up to a horse if you have one. And then, ride around with a little plow. But again, that stuff doesn't really work out. So, for now, it's just going to be all manual, tilling the ground, like a Neolithic farmer. Yeah. Next thing that I want to talk about, if we grab a shovel. So in a previous update, we introduced the idea of roads, or paths, and there's dirt road, and then you can eventually pave it into a cobblestone road. But this update, in preparation for some later plans I have with carts and plows, has introduced new heights. So you can actually keep going down on your roads. Down to 1/8 of a block. So that's nice, and so the dirt road gives you a speed boost, except when it's raining, in which case it gives you a speed penalty, and then the stone road just gives you a speed boost all the time. When the carts are introduced, you will need to have a full 1/8 gradient to have a cart to be able to go up. It won't be able to go up a regular block. I just thought, it's got wheels, kind of makes sense that you would need some kind of gradient. And it means that if you want to use carts to transport goods or materials over a distance, you kind of have to plan ahead. You can't just take a cart and just go off into the woods. In real life, maybe you could have, but in real life, there's gradual slopes rather than, 1 meter jumps in terrain. So I just thought that having a 1 meter jump, it just would not look right with the cart. I couldn't accept that as correct. So I think we've covered a lot of those changes, so we'll talk a little bit more about some of the terrain generation changes at the end, and then some of the bug fixes. I think the next major thing to talk about is what is behind this wall, and that is cattle. So this is the Aurochs. It's got a new model, updated. Get back in your... Good. Anyway, so this is the male Aurochs. This is a female Aurochs. They have different textures, and that's just based on some... I think the last Aurochs was killed in 1627 in Poland. It was hunted. They are the ancestor of modern cattle. They were native to North Africa, Eurasia, so from Europe through Asia. There were 3 different subspecies. Anyway, so the Aurochs will generate in Africa, Europe, and Asia, those regions. You can domesticate them. So it's similar domestication mechanics that you have with the other updated animals, so the sheep, the goat, the pigs. So cattle, the horses, cattle are now added to that list. So I think they do look quite a bit more fearsome than they used to. I think it kind of makes sense. People are like, how come I get so much knockback and damage from just a cow? Well, because this is what a wild cow looks like. They are very large and very scary. And then there's a few other cattle that are added. So this is a buffalo, female, and this is a male buffalo. And these are water buffalo or Cape buffalo. I'm kind of treating them the same. I know they're not the same. Water buffalo are native to India and Asia. Cape buffalo are native to Africa. I'm treating them as if they're the same. So these will spawn in... originally it was going to be rivers and swamps in Africa and Asia, but it is now actually... if they'll spawn in 1 deep water in Africa and Asia. So anywhere there's a little bit of a pond, you can have buffalo spawning. These here are bison. So these are actually based on steppe bison. Their horns are pretty big if they will turn. This is the male, that's the female. Males are generally bigger than females. I think this male is actually smaller because there is some, there's some size variation within the animals themselves. So I think this is just a rather large female. So these are the bison. They will spawn in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. So they're the only kind of bovid that will spawn in the Americas. All 3 of these can be domesticated into cattle, but they will stop being like it won't be like a buffalo cow. It'll just be a cow, which is to say an Aurochs cow. And over here we have the cows. So if they will spread out a little bit, they are based on Holstein Frisian cows. So that's the female. This is the male. So I think that's what the vanilla cows were kind of based on, the black and white ones. I just googled some images the other night and tried to base the textures on that. So the female's got a black face with some white on it, and then a white body with black spots. The male has an almost all black body, except for white on the belly and legs, black ears, and then a white face. So I thought, that's distinct. It's easy to tell them apart. At some point, the bulls will be usable as oxen to pull the plows, but again, plows are not really in this update. There are a few other changes that I want to talk about in this update. So I mentioned some terrain changes. You may have noticed that the bamboo here looks quite a little bit different. So bamboo has got a new texture. The leaf blocks go I think most of the way up the plant. I think this looks a lot more like real bamboo. Bamboo also generates. It was generating in clumps before, but it was so common that you really couldn't tell one clump from another. So that has been changed. So it really does grow in these clumps now, a little better. So that is a change to bamboo. For bug fixes, fixed a beehive dupe glitch. Not going to explain what that was in case you haven't updated yet. Fixed cross-pollination glitch on, or so-called cross-pollination glitch on fruit trees. Was actually kind of surprising what was causing that, but that's fixed now. Ghost items in stone hoppers when you're pressing fruits, that's been fixed. Now let's go to morning. I have increased the generation of beehives in a couple of ways. One of them is that they are more common to generate when the world generates, just because originally I had reduced it because I thought they were becoming too common over time in subsequent years, but I have partially rolled that back. So they will generate on world gen a little better. Also, the other kind of beehive, the tree hive, which can grow on large trees, is a lot more common to find. So you'll probably see those a little more commonly. And that's just when you have like a thick log and the beehive is like growing out of the side of the tree rather than hanging from a branch. So those are a little more common. I've added another recipe for getting honey specifically into a bucket. So let's just grab a bucket and some honey and a knife. I'm going to go into debug mode so that when I go into survival mode, I don't die. You will also notice that I've added a valid animals to the debug mode. I mean, I'm not expecting people to be playing in debug mode because it's mostly just for testing. But if you are looking at a world in creative mode, for example, and you want to see what kinds of animals can spawn, valid animals will tell you which animals are allowed to spawn in the area you're in. So this is Asia. So oryx, buffalo, bison, and wild horse are legal in this spot. So if I take a knife, bucket, and then 4 honeycombs, I can get a bucket of honey that way. So some people were complaining that they had just way too many honeycombs and putting them into individual bowls was annoying. So this is a way to get the honey out of your honeycombs 4 times faster. So that is nice. I've reduced the benefit of straw clothing because I noticed that in hotter climates it was just too easy to exist. So that's getting kind of loud. Oh man, this is a long update video. So for our straw clothing, it's instead of each bit of straw clothing increasing your heat resistance by +1, it's every 2 pieces of straw clothing. However, any type of sandals, so if you're wearing leather sandals, that'll also count. So here I'm getting +2 to my heat resistance instead of +3, which I originally would have gotten. And that's only because I'm wearing these sandals. Like if I take those off, you see I lose one. So that is a change. There are some other changes with how heat works as well. So if I run around, in fact, I will start running around, just sprint for a little bit. And I think I may go into some more detail about some other features in a sec. So we'll just sprint for a little while. Just for a little bit. Okay. Let's actually run a little bit more just to make sure that that stays up long enough for me to talk about it. Okay, so you can see there it says exertion heat +1. So I've been running around. Walking will also do it, though much, much slower. I've been running around. That's heating up my body, making me feel warmer. So by default, that will only give you +1. So you might have noticed my temperature gauge went up by +1 as I was running around. And this is just going to increase the timer. So it says 2 minutes. It's not actually going to be 2 minutes. And I'll show you that in a sec. Because if I stop moving for 20 seconds, so if we just sit here for 20 seconds, what you're going to see is that that'll actually say resting, and then the timer will get cut into 1/10, and it'll be going down 10 times faster. So it, currently says 150 here. I think it'll be around 141 or something. It's going to switch over to resting mode. Even there. So yeah, resting mode now. It's like 10 seconds left. In fact, if I exit and start walking, now it's only 30 seconds left because I rested off most of that. So you cool down a lot faster when you're resting. You can see it's gone up maybe a little bit just because I've been walking around just a bit. So, that's interesting to note. Why is that important? So this actually, it's maybe a bit of a strategy. If you're in a cold environment, if you sprint around a bit, you move around, as long as you don't stand still for too long, you can actually keep yourself a little warmer. Maybe you wouldn't have been warm enough with the clothing that you have, but just by running around, sprinting a bit, you can get your body warm enough that you can get comfortable. If you go to sleep, you will lose all of the exertion benefit that you had, or penalty. But something to notice is that depending on the kinds of clothing you're wearing, you can actually get more than just +1. So I'm gonna quickly craft a straw cloak, grass cloak, I guess, so we can put that on. You'll actually notice that now I am into the yellow zone. So it says I'm actually getting too hot. If we run around quite a bit more, I should be actually able to get that to go even higher. There is an interesting kind of interplay between a couple of these mechanics. So we're just going to run around a bit now that we've got this heavy clothing on. Yep, so you can see +2. Not much time on it though, because it will cool. I'll fall back into +1 in not very long. But something you might have noticed is that this says damp, and that says damp, and that is because I got sweaty. So now that we are in the kind of red zone there, you can get sweaty. Excuse me. So by getting sweaty, that can reduce the effectiveness of your clothing. Also your clothing won't dry out. You can, because I'm in debug mode, it'll tell me the wetness is 500. Your clothing won't dry out while you're continuing to be a sweaty, gross person. So while I'm still overheating like this, my clothing's not going to dry out. It's just going to continue to be damp like that. And if I was in a cold environment here, right, like if I was in the Arctic and I had lots of heavy clothing on, and in fact, like this +2 here is because that is half of the heat resistance penalty that I'm taking right here, this -2. So, it's half or 1. Like if you have any amount of heat resistance penalty, you can go to level 2, but then after that, it'll be every 2, you'll get an extra level. of potential exertion heat. So let's say you're wearing like bear fur clothing. So you have like a huge heat resistance penalty, very, very heavy, warm clothing. If your body's heating up inside of that clothing, all that heat is trapped in, you're going to get overheated very quickly. And that is going to make you sweat a ton. Your clothing's going to get damp. And that is when you're in trouble. Because previously, damp clothing just had like a static -2 to your temperature. But now the penalty you get from your temperature for damp or soaked clothing is relative to the ambient temperature. So if it's really cold outside, like -20 Celsius, I don't know, what is that, 10 or something Fahrenheit? Something like that. And your clothing is damp. You're going to be very, very cold. You're going to be... I tried this in -26 Celsius weather with these mechanics, and I just sprinted until I started sweating, and then I had my death timer came on, 2.5 minutes until I died. I froze to death because of my damp clothing. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, damp clothing won't dry out when it's less than 0 degrees Celsius, so below freezing, your damp clothing won't dry out. It'll just freeze on you. Also, there is a new humidity value. You may have noticed humidity listed there right next to rain in the debug mode. You can also see it in F3. It's right next to rain. And humidity is a relatively simple calculation. It is mostly just the rainfall, but if it's raining, in fact, let's actually make it rain. So you can see the current humidity is 9.4%. So it starts to rain, immediately the humidity goes up to 100%. But it'll go back down once the rain stops. And then the only other thing that changes humidity is if you're in a swamp, your humidity will increase by 35 to 40%. If you're in the swamp biome. And humidity affects a couple things. First of all, how quickly your clothing dries out. So at 100% humidity, your clothes just won't dry. Like if they're in your inventory or on your body, or hanging up on a clothesline, your clothes will not be able to dry out if the humidity is 100%. So like if it's raining, even if your clothesline is sheltered or you're sheltered, your clothes will not dry out. The water just can't evaporate off of them because the air is saturated with water already. So there's that. And the other thing is that it kind of affects how your body is affected by the temperature. So on the temperature meter, there's the green zone, which is your comfortable range. There's the cyan zone, which is your just barely too cold range. And there's the yellow zone, which is the just barely too hot range. The yellow zone is the point at which your body starts sweating, but that sweating is enough to cool you down such that you're fine. So there's no other like penalties or anything associated with being in the yellow zone, which we are in now. I think because our exertion, is going down, or the temperature has changed or something. There's that to keep in mind. But when it's too humid, the effectiveness of your sweating is reduced. So the amount of time that you can spend in that yellow zone is also reduced. So I guess to say that more clearly, the temperature won't be as high, but you'll still be into the red zone because sweating hasn't helped you. So for example, normally the default green zone is 20 to 25 Celsius, which is 68 to 77 Fahrenheit. And then from 77 Fahrenheit or 25 Celsius up to 86 Fahrenheit or 30 Celsius, you're in that sweaty zone. If you're in 100% humidity, 25.1 Celsius already puts you into the red. So it's the equivalent of being in 30.1 Celsius, or 6 point whatever Fahrenheit, just because the sweating just isn't benefiting you. So you're still getting some of those negative penalties for being too hot. So I think the point at which the humidity is always 100% is if the rainfall is like 2,750 or above. I'm just going to tell you those values. But that is the point at which humidity is 100%, and it does scale up until then. So a couple reasons. People were complaining that tropical environments were too easy, and I agreed with that. I think it was too easy just to live in those environments, and especially with some of these agriculture changes, like anywhere that's like 2,000 rainfall or above. Hey, now that counts as for your crops. That's like having water everywhere. That's actually quite nice, and I felt that to help balance that out a little bit, those areas are now going to be super humid. So if you do want to take advantage of that high rainfall, you will be doing so at the cost of that high humidity, meaning if your clothes get wet, they just won't dry out. And it's going to be a lot harder for you to keep cool just because of that extra humidity. So I think that's a good change. At some point, I may also have humidity affect food decay. Currently, that's not in the game. I think I might have talked about that at one point, but I'm just going to clarify that there is no humidity at this point. I have not had humidity affect food decay. So that's something to keep in mind. One other thing that I have done is, and this kind of ties in with an existing feature, where if it's too hot outside and you don't have a hat on and you're in the sun, you get like an extra level of heat added onto your body. So you can see my temperature gauge. I go from red all the way back down to green just by putting the hat on. So that was an extra benefit that the straw hat had. The other hats don't have it. It acts as like a sunshade. So along with that, there is a similar thing going on with your feet. And that, so the straw hat thing, the hat thing, that's when it's sunny and you're feeling too warm that you get that extra bit of heat added to you from the sun. For the feet, though, it's only when the temperature is 30 Celsius or above. And the way that works is that if you're walking on sand or stone or metal, and it's in the sun and it's at least 30 Celsius, then you're going to feel too hot unless you're wearing some kind of footwear. That could be sandals, could be boots. Just something on your feet will protect you from the hot sand or hot rocks that you may be walking on. Also, sand now imposes a movement penalty on you, just a small one. It's just a little harder to walk or run in sand than it is on regular terrain. That's not fully offset by the speed bonus on sand that the sandals give you. It is fully offset by the leather sandals, though. So you do come out slightly ahead with leather sandals. I just thought that sand, I don't know, if you've ever tried to run on a beach, it's not that easy. It kind of makes you tired. It's not super fun. And you feel like you're going so slowly. Anyway, I think, let me look at this. So we've got the bamboo changes, bug fixes. Oh yeah, boot soles. There's like an additional crafting shape for boot soles. You may have noticed that undergrowth is back. It had been accidentally disabled, or pretty much disabled for a while, that there wasn't any undergrowth that was generating. So that'd be things like ferns and like the shorter trees and stuff. We got some of that stuff going on right here. If it was a more tropical environment, you'd see a few others as well. There's like the low undergrowth that is on the ground. There's like short little palm ferny things going on. Those had been introduced a few updates ago, but had accidentally, I think around the time the bushes were enabled, their spawn rate kind of fell off. So it was really hard to find any of those. So those are back. Crops, soil following, water. Oh yeah, there was a bug where trees dropping leaf litter would sometimes screw up clay soil. That no longer happens, so that's fixed. I got the mechanics, the millstone, quern, exertion, heat tolerance, dampness, humidity, sweating. honey. Yeah, I think we've covered in in the cows. I think that covers all the things that I would like to talk about in this update. This has been a very long video. Oh my goodness, 55 minutes. That's insane. If you guys stuck with me through the entire video, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All your support that you guys leave on my videos, all the positivity. I really appreciate it. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want more updates on Terraforming Craft Plus. I have a Patreon. The link is in the description. It really helps if you support me. Yeah, thanks guys. I have, I think I mentioned over the summer I lost my job, and was feeling kind of down for a while during the pandemic, just at home. But working on TFC again, I took a bit of a break in the fall. Working on TFC again, getting this update out, getting new features developed. It really feels good. I enjoy it, and it's just nice to be back doing something productive. So, thanks once more. And as always, if you have any bug reports, head over to the Discord to let me know about those. We also accept suggestions. Or if you just want to chat, I think we've recently passed 2,000 members on the Discord, so please feel free to check that out. And thank y'all for watching. I'll see y'all next time.